Thank you. So now it's my really great pleasure to introduce the next speaker. So the next speaker is Imane. Imane graduated from KAUST, and she's currently an assistant professor at KFUPM. So we are really proud of her, and I hope we will learn a little bit more about what you are doing in this really great institution.
Hello, everyone. I'm very thrilled to be back once again at KAUST and meet this very inspiring community of women in science, engineering, and research. I would like to share with you today a little bit about my journey. I'm going to talk a bit on the science aspect of it, what I have been doing while being in KAUST, and what I did afterwards, a little bit what I'm doing now at my current institution, KFUPM. So the title of my talk today is Needles in a Stack of Needles, Scouring DNA Variants for Rare Genetic Disease Culprits. So this is my main passion of what I'm doing as a computer scientist or a data scientist. And we'll talk about a little bit about that in today's talk. Okay, I'll start with a little bit about me. I am one of the very earliest students to ever be affiliated with KAUST. Actually, I was the proud recipient of KAUST Discovery Scholarship back in 2008, where I was still doing my undergraduate degrees, my bachelor degree in computer science. And once I received KAUST at that point was still under construction. There was not the campus that we are seeing here today. So I actually had, I fell in love with KAUST from the dream of what KAUST would be. So I recall in my university, Sultan Qaboos University in Oman, Dr. Najah Hashri came to give us a talk about KAUST and the vision of KAUST and the vision of the late King Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, may he rest in peace. And I immediately applied, and I was one of the very lucky recipients of this scholarship, which allowed me, upon completion of my bachelor degree, to join KAUST and pursue both my master's and PhD degree later on. So my background, since I was a child, actually, since I was 10 years old, I was very determined. I knew what I want to do in the future, and that was heavily influenced by my dad. My dad is an academician; he's a mathematician. So since I was little, I knew I wanted to do that as well. I wanted to become an academician as well. But at that time, when I was a child, I wanted to either be a mathematician like him as well, or a chemist. However, when I reached high school, I discovered computer science, and I learned about this kind of discipline, and I wanted to pursue that. And this is exactly what I did. Now, when I joined KAUST for my master's, at that point, my passion in computer science was in wireless sensor networks or networking in general. How can we build systems or algorithms that can facilitate different application of computer networks and make the networks work, or make the network faster, make your Wi-Fi faster, and so on. So that was more on the pure aspects of computer science. Now, when I wanted to do my PhD afterwards, I'd say I fell in bioinformatics by accident. I did not mean to do it. I was never into biology before. Actually, as I said, I wanted to either do something data science related or chemistry. But I ended up in bioinformatics by accident. And that's when I met my PhD advisor, who introduced me to this field of how can I use my knowledge as a computer science and work in an interdisciplinary field, help answer some biological questions or some biomedical questions using the knowledge of computer science and utilizing artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms. And that's exactly what I did throughout my journey. And this is the passion I discovered, and this is what I'm still loving. How can we use the basic computer science aspects or algorithms, all these advances and trends, to actually help solve problems beyond biology as well? So I'm also, upon graduation with my PhD back in 2019, actually the summer before it, in summer 2018, there was a royal decree, a very historical moment in Saudi Arabia that enabled women for the very first time to study at King Fahd University of Petroleum and Minerals. This is one of the most prestigious universities in the kingdom, and it is nicknamed by many as the MIT of the Middle East. And this, since its establishment back in 1963, this university has known to be only for men, and not even a single woman stepped foot in it before. Now, back in 2018, when this royal decree was issued, I was just at the end of my PhD time, wrapping up my thesis, and it was for me the perfect time to apply as a faculty member there. And I'm very pleased, I'm very honored to be one of the very first founding female faculty member at KFUPN. So I joined them on the next academic year, September 2019, and I am still an assistant professor there ever since. Now, my research area generally expands to developing computational methods to answer biomedical questions. Now I'll talk about the one in particular today, which is disease-causing genetic variants, how to find links between certain genetic mutations or variants and certain genetic diseases. How can we help clinicians? How can we help geneticists reach a diagnosis faster? How can we save time and cost for patients? And how can we utilize artificial intelligence to do that, to help us in this regard? And beyond that, I also have other projects where I do work again on interdisciplinary research problems, analyzing bacterial composition in soil. This is important, for example, my collaborators in the Eastern region. So we do study the soil composition and the effects of the biodiversity of certain bacteria in the soil if we add certain chemicals, certain pollutants, and so on. So this is more on the environmental aspects. So I work with environmental engineers and scientists, and also participated, or I have a project on since the pandemic started, on analyzing more of the genomic aspects of some of the SARS-CoV-2 virus strains, and also prediction of certain functions of certain proteins. So I do work on more of interdisciplinary areas now, and this is what I love. I no longer work on pure theoretical aspects of computer science, and I discovered how much I enjoy actually working with scientists from different disciplines, energy, environment, medical doctors, and I learned throughout my journey in KAUST how can I sit with someone who doesn't have any idea about what I'm doing, and I don't have any idea about what he's doing, and we can actually reach a middle point, how we can explain to each other in very, very simple language, what are we trying to do? What are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve, basically? And this is something that resonates with what Roshan said earlier, is finding good collaborators, finding people to collaborate with, and being a good collaborator yourself. And in my opinion, it really dramatically improved my communication skills, not just with the community, my scientific community in my field, but beyond that. All right, so I'll go now to talk a little bit about some background. I'll give you a background about my work. So as many of you know, all humans, we share around 99.9% of identical DNA. And only a small fraction of that DNA difference is what makes each one of us unique. And it gives now how different it makes us. It could change the hair color, the height, different aspects. And this is still a very interesting area, or a big mystery on how can you understand your genetic makeup, how can you understand the blueprint of life, the DNA, and how each changes, each location in different genes would affect you in one way or another. But of course, unfortunately, this also gives rise to many, many diseases. And this is the thing that I'm focusing in. How can we ease that pain of these genetic diseases using our knowledge of the pre-existing knowledge that we have, and combining it with some predictions using artificial intelligence. Okay, and I also like to always share this. I say we are all Xmen as far as genetic mutation go. We all have so many mutations in our DNA, and what could happen as a result of these mutations is something is still largely unknown. We are still discovering it. Scientists are discovering this every day. Okay. So this is what we want to do. We want to understand or this is the big question. We want to understand the link between the genotype, or it's basically your DNA sequences, your own DNA, and its effect to the disease, or what we call a phenotype. Phenotypes can be the observable characteristics, certain symptoms of these diseases that are observable and can be detected. So we would like to understand this link, what thing affects the other, and vice versa. This question of genetic diseases or genetic mutations and variation and their effect with diseases still, frankly speaking, it's an area of debate, and still we don't know most of the genes. So it's estimated that we have 20,000 genes. Again, it's estimated, and we still don't know many of them and what they do. Basically, what are their function? What if something happened or something wrong happened in one of them? What would be the result? We only know a small number of those. And even some of these diseases, some of them have been previously believed to be monogenic. Monogenic means they are only caused by a mutation in a single gene. And then later it was shown in some other studies they might be caused by more, and so on. So this is an area by itself, and we're not going into that. The idea here, what I really wanted to show is that since each and every one of us has a large set of mutations, it's very difficult for a geneticist to go and check them one by one. It's very difficult, very time consuming. Even if you do certain filtering on these variants or mutations, you would still end up with around hundreds. And we are here speaking only about an exome sequence, which is only if you look at specific part of the DNA only, not the complete DNA. Because previously, scientists used to believe that the genetic diseases can only arise from mutations from this part of DNA sequence that is called the exome. But now, more and more evidence are saying, no, it could arise from the rest of the DNA that we have ignored before for many, many years. And now we have to look the problem is even more and more complicated. So we do have now even not just hundreds, but thousands, or maybe tens of thousands after filtering for these variants to try to make sense of which one. Because remember, the very first, before you can even come up with gene therapy or any therapeutics, you have to understand the root of the problem. You have to understand which gene has been broken, where is the problem on a very molecular level. And from there, you can go to therapeutics or certain drug discovery or protocols and so on. Okay, so how this is generally done at the clinic. So usually the patient, in many cases, fortunately, it's a child with the parents. They walk into the clinic, they do the sequencing by the sequencing machine for the DNA, for the trio analysis, both the parent and the child. And then they do this kind of filtering to try to figure out which mutation is probably in which gene that is probably or likely to be the cause, okay? Now, the very first successful identification of a mutation using this classical or traditional approach at the clinic was of Miller's syndrome from 2010. So this is somehow recent. However, this kind of approach has a success rate of around 22 to 25% only. In many cases, they have unresolved cases. And when I recall speaking with one of the geneticists I work with, and she has so many cases like that. And this is very frustrating for them because they are seeing kids and kids most of the time, and they cannot figure out what's wrong with those kids. So this approach does not really scale well. And even with filtering, they end up with no diagnosis. So if you look at it, globally, there are around, if you just look at the rare genetic diseases, only the rare ones, not even the common ones. So globally, there are 350 million people that suffer from rare genetic diseases. In KSA alone, and this is what makes it even more difficult in this region, around 8% of babies are born with genetic or partly genetic diseases. Now, this incidence rate is higher compared to the rest of the world. And this, of course, can be attributed mostly to the consequent marriages. So marrying in areas where the marriages between cousins are common, you would expect a higher incident rate of genetic diseases. And the sad part is that it takes around 3 to 10 years to reach a conclusive diagnosis for these patients. And around an average of 7 different physicians. Because since they are rare, many physicians would not have seen these cases before. And of course, it takes rounds and rounds of visits to different places and lots of time in order to reach a conclusive diagnosis. So what we want to, what we see here, or how this problem has been referred to as needles in stacks of needles. You are not just trying to find a needle in a haystack here. It's a very complex question where you are dealing with so many mutations and you're trying to identify what is going wrong with them. Now, thanks to advances in next generation sequencing technologies, now, since the first human have been sequenced back in early 2000s, with a cost of $100 million, now you can sequence an entire genome here at KAUST for a mere $1,000. So there's a huge drop in the cost, which enables us as data scientists to actually explore this wealth of information. And it actually puts a lot of pressure in developing computational methods for such an analysis. Now, I don't have plenty of time, so I would skip through some of these slides. So here the challenge is how can we develop models that can answer these questions so that a patient walks into the genetic clinic, we sequence him since now it's cheaper to sequence, and we can use AI or machine learning to try to predict some of the variants that are likely to be the reason behind the disease. And we are not replacing geneticists, as many are scared of AI. What we say is we are here to facilitate, to help, to make the process more streamlined and smoother for the geneticists to reach a diagnosis much faster. Okay. So this is what I have been working on during my PhD for most of the time. And I worked on different models and we published that and we enhanced them. We evaluated them both on synthetic data and we also had some real patient data from the UK 10K project. And we showed promising results and we actually outperformed the other existing models and we were very happy about that. So I recall just here a note on this. So we have this 19 patients from the UK 10K data. It took them 3 years to find the molecular cause of the disease, which is congenital hypothyroidism. But it took us 3 days on our computational cluster to actually find the exact same ones as matches. So this really shows us that how much AI can be extremely powerful in such problems. Now our models or our collaborators work in different places. So we have collaborators locally in the kingdom and also internationally in the US, part of the TEDdy and Radiant project. And also from Cambridge, who are with us since day one, working on the data and developing the models and analyzing the results. And this was actually the basis of my startup that I applied for while being at KAUST, which I call Genome Fit. And it's actually one of the winners of KAUST Taqaddam Startup Accelerator Program at the time. And also my PhD work on these models have won KAUST AlMarai Prize for Scientific Creativity in 2020. And this is basically the first publication. Again, we worked with a great team, great collaborators from the UK, Sanger Institute, University of Birmingham, and University of Cambridge. And I would like to end with a quote that I really like from the late Steve Jobs. I think the biggest innovations of the 21st century will be the intersection of biology and technology. A new era is beginning just like the digital one. And with that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have time just for a short question. Yes, Imane.
Thank you so much for this amazing work. Yuval Harari talks about the twin revolution of AI and biomedical applications. And also it has a very powerful tool for our future, but also brings a huge threat. What are the threats that you see and how, as a researcher, you could avoid these?
Well, thank you for this
and just
very tricky question.
Also another touch on a second question.
Yes.
And how this relates to gender biases in the future as well.
Interesting. Okay, so the first one is the one that I get asked quite often. So are we these models or these AI-based models are gonna replace doctors at one point, especially that there have been lots of breakthroughs in this research. So there have been studies that show that a radiologist or a model that is trained on a machine can actually perform as well as a board-certified dermatologist or a radiologist, depending on the application. So there have been quite of concerns regarding that. But what I always emphasize personally in my work is that what we want to do is to help, to facilitate. We know doctors are extremely busy and there is a lot of pressure of seeing many patients during the day. And if there is a way that we can help them maybe filter out, instead of looking at hundreds of variants, just look at these top 10 that these models have suggested to be likely the ones, then we are saving them a lot of time, right? And cost as well. So we don't aim to replace doctors. We just want to help. And about gender biases, that's an interesting question because, to be frank, throughout my work, I haven't encountered issues with that, since I work with a lot of female doctors in the kingdom, and they are quite powerful and very, very inspiring. So I've never, to be honest, in my journey so far, I haven't had an issue with that. So maybe I'm not the right person to ask this question to.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, we have to thank you and finish your talk. We're already late. Thank you so much. So we are a bit late on the agenda. We have 15 minutes left. So we take a short break, 10 minutes. Please don't be late for the starting again. So we start at 3:45. Thank you.